Hi you guys, welcome back to another video. So today's video is a little bit different. I walk you all through a time lapse of this painting that I did recently. So here it is. It's this really kind of colorful, playful landscape, and it is acrylic on 8x10 canvas. So I basically just walk you guys through the painting from start to finish, and I go over just the process of creating it. So I hope you guys enjoy, and thank you for watching. Alright, so I'm excited to walk you all through this painting that I did recently. It's very bright and colorful and playful, and I really just had a good time making it. And to start, I did want to go over some of the paint colors that I used. So I used white, neon yellow, neon pink, a glittery pink, primary red, phthalo blue, primary blue, mauve, green gold, and a lime green. And to begin with, I just had this 8x10 canvas that was already painted this peachy color. So from a previous painting that I did, I had some leftover paint, so I just kind of put it on there so I didn't waste anything. And to start the painting, I used my neon yellow, and I just lightly sketched in my landscape and then the little path that I wanted there to be. And here I'm starting to apply the colors for the sky, so I'm just kind of really loosely using white, primary blue, and a little bit of that mauve color. And I'm being very loose with my mark making, so I'm really just trying to go for coverage right now and a little bit of depth in the sky, but not worrying too much about, putting in the clouds yet or exactly where certain colors might go. I'm just kind of going with the flow, adding in some pinks, some mauves, and blending it in. So here I am starting to work on the actual land and the kind of hills and the valleys that you'll see in the landscape. And to do this, I'm using a mixture between phthalo green and white, and a little bit of phthalo blue at some points too. And for this part, I'm really not focusing so much on getting that depth in my composition yet. I'm just trying to get most of the canvas covered at this point and working on adding in different parts of lights and darks. And for this whole painting, or at least for the majority of this, I'm using one brush. So I'm not rinsing it off or washing it completely in between colors. So here I'm starting to use that lime green, and here's that green gold color. So it's one of my absolute favorite paint colors. It's so beautiful and juicy, and especially if you can use it in oils, it is just beautiful. But the reason that I mainly use one brush for this part is I want to be very loose with this painting. I don't want to be so uptight and worrying about if my colors blend or if you see any streaks in it. So I'm really just dipping in between one color to the next, and I'm letting it show through. This, I think, creates a lot more interest for the viewer. It's more fun to paint this way, so you can have all these beautiful different marks showing through. And here I actually use a little bit of the neon yellow, so it's creating this really, really bright green, and I'm adding in some whites as well. So this is just allowing me to cover most of the canvas, getting it covered, and then having lots of different colors that I can use as a base and build off of from here. So now that I've had the whole canvas covered, I am starting to define a little bit more shapes. So generally whenever I'm doing a painting, I do start from background to foreground, but once I have the entire surface covered, I like to hop back and forth between background and foreground. So here I'm working a little bit on the sky, adding in where I want some of my clouds, and it is very textured, so I'm not smoothing out my paint completely. I'm leaving a lot of the marks there. This keeps the paint a little bit more wet, so that way I can go back and work with it some more. So just adding in a little bit of that mauve color, mixing in some blues to create some purples. And this part I am leaving a lot of the marks showing, just so you have a little bit more the illusion of clouds and the sky moving. This is a little bit of that primary blue that I started with, so just brightening up parts of the sky. And one question that I do actually get asked quite often from my students, and in case you guys didn't know, I'm also an art teacher, so I have a studio located just outside of Atlanta called Studio 23 Atlanta. But one of the questions that I get a lot from at least most of my adult students is, what kinds of paint do I use, or what brands do I use? And for this painting, and in most paintings in general, I do use a variety between like really kind of cheap, affordable craft paints all the way up to more heavy body professional art paints. And I think the main reason that I do this, one is if I really love the color, it doesn't matter to me what kind or what brand it is. But I know at least whenever I was in school, or for people in general, if you're trying something new and you're not too sure about things, and especially if you don't have a big budget, if your instructor or your professor or anyone like that tells you that you have to use a certain brand of paint, it can really be pretty discouraging, especially if you can't afford that. And I don't ever want anyone, my students or anyone in general, to feel that way. So for me, and my philosophy with painting is that if you like the color and if that is what you can afford, then let's go with it. We can always make it work, and I think that even can make you a little bit of a better artist if you're able to use something that maybe isn't the best quality or it doesn't have the best coverage. You can still make really beautiful artworks with it. So just putting that out there. It's my little tangent on paints and kinds of paints that you can use. Feel free to use what you've got. There's no pressure to ever go out and buy like the most expensive brands out there, because you can still make really beautiful paintings with the really affordable ones. So at this point in the painting, I am starting to go in with a little bit more bold colors. I'm laying them on top of that base that I created, and I'm doing some little marks and some bigger marks, so that way I can kind of define where maybe there's a hill here or a bush, or even just detail marks that create that interest for the viewer. And for the path, I am leaving a lot of that neon yellow exposed, but to create a little bit more definition with it, I'm using neon yellow, white, and actually a tiny bit of mauve too. So here, just working in with a little bit more of those marks, and I'm jumping between the foreground of the landscape and the background of the landscape, and adding in a mixture between phthalo blue and phthalo green. And then as I'm painting, I'm also looking at different directions that I'm painting. So that line I just did, it kind of follows the path, and that can lead your eye going in that direction. And then at this point, I am pretty happy with most of the kind of bottom half of the painting. So I'm going in with my smaller detail brush now, and I'm starting to add in these pinks and reds that I'm using. So I'm using that primary red, glittery pink, and a little bit of white. So this is just kind of like flowers that you'll see in the foreground, and I'm playing with different layers of the paint as well. So more reds on top of pinks, and then going back with more like brighter pinks on top of the reds. And at this point now, I'm starting to add in some glitter pink and a little bit of the neon pink and white into the sky. So this, I'm just creating a little bit more pop of color, so that way your eyes move all throughout the canvas. They're not just focused on one point. And adding little accents of it within the path too, so that way your eye goes throughout the painting. And for this part, I'm using the primary blue and mauve to create some purples. So these are more of the deeper colors you'll see in the sky. And I did actually go back at like maybe a couple days ago. I did a kind of purple mark right towards the middle of the sky at the top. And after kind of looking at it, it was too much in the middle. So I went back over with a tiny bit of white and softened it. So once I had all of my really bright pinks and more of the darker purples in the sky, I went back down to the land part, and I added a little bit of neon green to make some really bright parts. And here I'm going with phthalo blue and phthalo green together to add in some of the darker parts. And here I'm using a little bit of white just to create some of the similar marks that I was using, but just in a different color. And I'm just finishing off with a couple little marks here. At this point in the painting, I was moving a little bit slower just because I was pretty happy with the composition and all of the marks I had made. So just finishing off with a couple tiny little touches. Adding a little bit more pink because I love pink. I think it is such a pretty and happy color. I love to use it in most of my artwork. And then here's the finished piece. So I am pretty proud of this little baby, and I just had a lot of fun doing it. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.